The cameras rolled, the audience clapped and the band wrapped up their opening notes as Jimmy Kimmel walked onto the stage with his usual grin, waving to the crowd and gesturing toward the iconic desk and chairs. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have a true Hollywood legend in the house," he announced with practiced excitement, "an Academy Award winner, a man whose films define generations. Please welcome Al Pacino." The audience erupted in applause, some standing, as the curtain lifted and Pacino walked out slowly but confidently, his trademark half-smile on his face, waving at the crowd before giving Jimmy a quick handshake and taking his seat. "Al Pacino," Jimmy said again, beaming. "You know, we don't get bigger than this, folks." The audience clapped once more before settling. Pacino leaned back in the chair, his dark glasses still on, adjusting them slightly, and muttered in his gravelly voice, "Well, you finally got me here, Jimmy." Jimmy chuckled. "It took years. I was starting to think you didn't like me." Pacino tilted his head, paused, then suddenly leaned forward with that familiar sharp energy in his voice and said, loud enough for the whole audience to hear, "Who fucking like you, Jimmy?" The words landed like a punchline but carried a sharpness that caught both the crowd and Jimmy off guard. For a second, the audience laughed nervously, unsure whether it was a joke or an insult, and Jimmy forced a smile, raising his hands as if to say, "I walked into that one." "Okay, wow, starting strong," Jimmy replied, half laughing, half awkward. "I mean, I was just fishing for a compliment, but that's one way to put it." Pacino chuckled hoarsely, letting the silence hang a little too long before adding, I'm kidding. You're all right, Jimmy. You've got a good thing going here." The tension eased, the crowd laughed with relief, but the moment lingered. Jimmy, being who he was, decided to lean into it. "You know, not everyone gets cursed at by Al Pacino on their own show. I think I just made history." Pacino smirked. "Well, I'm giving you something memorable. That's what I do." Jimmy adjusted his papers and quickly shifted gears. "Speaking of memorable, I was watching Heat again recently. That diner scene with De Niro? One of the greatest moments in film history. Do you still get people quoting your lines at you?" Pacino leaned forward, removing his glasses, and his eyes suddenly looked sharper, more alive. "All the time. And you know what? Sometimes it drives me crazy. People forget I'm a person, not just a collection of movie lines. I'll be walking down the street and someone shouts, 'She's got a great ass.' And I just, I can't escape it. It's funny for them, but it's my whole life." The audience laughed, but Pacino's tone had an edge of truth. Jimmy nodded, sensing the mix of humor and honesty. "Does it ever get too much?" he asked. Pacino scratched his chin, sighing. "Sometimes. You want to be remembered for your work, not just the sound bites. But I suppose that's the price of leaving a mark." Jimmy leaned in. "So when you said, what you said about me earlier," the crowd chuckled again, "is that how you really feel about talk shows? Like it's just sound bites and you'd rather not do them?" Pacino gave a little grin. "Maybe. Jimmy, I've done a lot of these. They can feel the same after a while. Same questions, same laughs. But you like to poke, you like to get under the skin." Jimmy smirked, taking it in stride. "I mean, I try. Sometimes I think people are too careful, too polished. I like when something real comes out." Pacino raised his brows. "You got something real just now." The audience clapped, laughing nervously again. Jimmy leaned back, exhaling theatrically. "Well, I don't know if my mom's gonna like it when she watches this, but hey, thanks, Al." Pacino chuckled, then shifted the conversation himself. People always want to know what I'm like off-screen. And I'll tell you something, I'm quieter, more private than people think. But I like a good clash, a good little confrontation. It wakes me up." Jimmy grinned. "Well, mission accomplished." The audience laughed again. "So do you clash with other actors the way you clash with late-night hosts?" Pacino paused. "Sometimes. But it's never about ego for me. It's about the work. If I think someone isn't giving it their all, I'll let them know. I don't care if it makes things uncomfortable. Because the scene matters more than our feelings." Jimmy nodded seriously. That's intense, but it makes sense. That's why your performances feel alive, like you're not afraid of that discomfort. Pacino smirked. Discomfort is where the truth comes out, Jimmy. Even here, right now. Jimmy hesitated for a second, unsure if Pacino was half joking again, then leaned toward the camera. Well, folks, this is shaping up to be one of the most unpredictable interviews we've ever had. Stay tuned, because I don't know where this is going. The crowd cheered, the band played lightly under the tension, and Pacino leaned back in his chair, smiling faintly as if he was the only one completely at ease. The energy in the room had shifted. It was entertaining, but no one could quite tell if the crack between them was playful or the start of something more. Jimmy tried to reset the tone as the applause settled, adjusting his tie with an exaggerated sigh before leaning forward. Okay, Al, I gotta admit, you've already made my night. I don't think anyone else has ever cursed me out within the first 2 minutes of sitting down. The audience laughed again, but there was still a nervousness hanging in the air, that sense of is he serious or joking? Pacino smiled thinly and tilted his head. Well, Jimmy, maybe you had it coming. Maybe I'm just the guy who says what everyone's thinking. The line landed with a mix of laughter and audible oohs from the crowd, and Jimmy raised his hands, half amused, half caught in the tension. Okay, shots fired. But let's be honest, you don't do a lot of shows like this. So I have to ask, why tonight? Why me? Pacino leaned back, his raspy voice slower now, deliberate, because I wanted to see if you were real. You build a whole career out of talking, Jimmy. Out of jokes, out of poking fun at people like me. I thought, let's go see if this guy can handle it when the spotlight flips. Jimmy chuckled nervously. Well, I guess we're finding out. He glanced at the audience. How am I doing so far, folks? They applauded, which gave him some cover, but Pacino didn't laugh this time. Instead, he looked at Jimmy with an almost piercing seriousness. You ever think about what it means, what you're doing? Every night, you bring people on here, you smile, you laugh, you ask them questions, but what's underneath it? Do you care about the stories, or do you just want the punchlines? The room grew quieter, the crowd sensing the weight of the question. Jimmy leaned back in his chair, trying to stay in control. That's a fair question, Al. Look, I joke around, sure, but I do care. I grew up watching people like you. Movies weren't just entertainment, they were windows into something bigger. If I didn't care, I'd just be reading cue cards and sending people home. I like when it gets messy, when it feels real, like right now. Pacino studied him for a moment, then smirked faintly. Maybe you got some fight in you after all. The audience clapped, relieved at the softer turn, and Jimmy leaned in. So what fights stand out to you? Not with me, but on set. You've worked with some legends. Did you ever really go head-to-head with someone? Pacino chuckled, his shoulders relaxing. Oh yeah. Plenty of times. You think De Niro and I just sat quietly during Heat? No. We went back and forth, all the time. Not in anger, but in passion. We both wanted it perfect. Sometimes we'd argue for hours about one scene. And that's good, it means you care. The best work comes from tension. Jimmy nodded. So maybe tonight's gonna be my best work too, huh? The audience laughed, and Pacino finally let out a warm chuckle. Maybe, Jimmy, maybe. Jimmy saw his chance to lighten it up. You know, you sound like a director yourself, always pushing for more. Did you ever want to sit in the director's chair permanently? Pacino shrugged. I've tried it. It's a different animal. But what I love most is the performance, the electricity when you're in a moment and you don't know exactly what's going to happen. That's why I got into this. That's why I'm here. And maybe that's what you're trying to do too, keep people off balance so something true slips out. Jimmy nodded slowly, appreciating the unexpected respect in the comment, then grinned. So what's the truest thing you've got right now? Something you've never told anyone on a show like this. Pacino looked out at the crowd, then back at Jimmy, leaning closer. I'll tell you something, I almost quit acting once. After the 70s, when the fame got too heavy, I thought, maybe I'll walk away, disappear. I was tired of everyone thinking they knew me because they knew the characters. It wasn't me. And I thought, what's the point if you can't breathe? But then I realized, this is who I am. Without it, I'd just be a guy wandering around the streets, wondering what he gave up. The audience grew quiet, listening intently, and Jimmy leaned forward sincerely. That's heavy. I mean, if you had walked away, cinema wouldn't be the same. But do you ever regret staying? Pacino smiled faintly, sometimes. Fame is a cage, Jimmy. It looks beautiful, but it closes in. Nights like this, though, when I can surprise you, maybe surprise myself, that makes it worth it. Jimmy exhaled slowly, letting the moment sit before glancing at the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not gonna lie, this is not the interview I expected, but it's definitely the one I needed. Al Pacino is giving me therapy on my own show. The audience laughed and clapped, the tension easing again, but there was still an unpredictability in the air, like Pacino could flip the tone back at any second. Jimmy, sensing the rhythm, decided to throw a playful jab. So just to clarify, Al, you don't actually hate me, right? Pacino smirked, leaning back with his arms crossed. Jimmy, hate is too strong a word. Let's just say, I don't like everybody. And I don't have to. But you're holding your own. That I like. The crowd cheered. Jimmy put a hand to his chest theatrically. Finally, approval from Al Pacino. Took a curse word and 30 minutes of interrogation, but I'll take it. Pacino laughed softly, almost kindly, and the audience joined in. The air in the studio shifted again, lighter now, though still charged. Jimmy leaned in for the last question of the segment. So if you could give me one piece of advice right now, as someone who survived Hollywood, survived fame, survived everything, what would it be? Pacino's eyes narrowed, but his voice softened. Don't fake it too much, Jimmy. People can smell it. The audience wants truth, even if it stings. Tonight, you've taken the sting, and you're still standing. That's good. Keep standing. The band started to play lightly as the audience clapped. Jimmy nodded. I'll take that. Al Pacino, everybody. The camera zoomed out, but the energy in the room lingered, a mix of humor, unease, and something real. It wasn't over, though. Everyone in the audience could feel it. Something else was brewing, and the night wasn't done surprising them. The cameras came back from a commercial break, the band finishing a quick riff as Jimmy smiled into the lens with his usual polish, though anyone paying close attention could see the tightness around his eyes, the way his fingers tapped a little too fast on the desk. We're back with the legendary Al Pacino, he announced. And if you missed the first half of this interview, you missed me being insulted, enlightened, and possibly saved by a man who knows more about truth in performance than anyone else alive. The audience laughed and applauded, and Pacino gave a little nod, his half-grin returning as he leaned back in the chair, glasses now in his hand. Jimmy tried to ease the moment. So Al, before the break, you said the audience can smell when it's fake, that you've got to keep it real. Now I pride myself on being pretty real, but maybe you've got a different opinion. Am I fake, Al? Pacino let the silence linger, tapping the glasses against his knee, before saying with that gravelly drawl, Jimmy, sometimes you're like cotton candy, sweet, colorful, disappears quick. You want to be steak. You want to have weight. The crowd gasped and laughed nervously, and Jimmy forced a grin. Okay, cotton candy, that's new, I'll take it. At least kids love me. Pacino leaned forward, his voice cutting through the laughter. But kids don't stay kids, Jimmy. They grow up, and then they don't remember the candy. They remember the meals that fed them. You want to last? Be the meal. The room went quiet again, and Jimmy rubbed his chin, half amused, half exposed. So you're saying I'm just fluff? Pacino shrugged. I'm saying you can be more. But right now? Yeah, maybe you're fluff. The crowd reacted with an uncomfortable mix of laughter and ooze, and Jimmy leaned back, exhaling. You know, most guests come on here to promote a movie or tell a funny story. You're giving me an existential crisis. Pacino grinned faintly. Maybe that's what you needed. Jimmy chuckled, shaking his head. I feel like I'm in a therapy session on national television. Then, wanting to shift the mood, he tried another angle. Okay, let's talk about lighter things. Do you still watch late-night shows yourself? Or is it all beneath you now? Pacino squinted at him, pausing just long enough to build tension before answering. I watch sometimes. But I don't like it when the host tries too hard. When the laughs feel forced. When it's about making themselves look clever instead of finding the truth. The crowd again reacted with uneasy laughter, and Jimmy pressed on, his smile now sharper. So are you saying I try too hard? Pacino smirked. You said it, not me. The audience erupted with a mix of laughter and gasps, sensing the sharpness of the exchange, and Jimmy leaned closer, finally dropping the jokey facade for a moment. Al, do you actually like being here, or did someone twist your arm? Pacino's voice softened, but his words hit harder. I came here to see if you could handle me. Not everyone can. Most just nod, smile, move on. You? You're standing in there. That's something. Jimmy blinked, caught off guard, before giving a small nod. I'll take that as the closest thing to a compliment I'm gonna get tonight. The audience clapped, relieved at the slight shift, but the tension still buzzed in the room. Jimmy turned to the camera, ready to wrap up. Ladies and gentlemen, Al Pacino, teaching us all how to take a punch and stay standing. The band began to play, the crowd applauded, but just as the show seemed ready to close, Pacino leaned into his mic again, his voice sharp and clear. One last thing, Jimmy, you asked me earlier if I like you. I'll tell you the truth. Who fucking like you, Jimmy? This time, the words rang heavier, more pointed, and the audience erupted into stunned laughter, some cheering, some gasping, unsure if it was pure comedy or a genuine jab. Jimmy froze for half a second, then threw his hands up, laughing through the discomfort. Well, that's it, folks, history has been made. Al Pacino just buried me on my own show. The crowd roared, the band amped up, and the camera panned wide as the two men sat there. Pacino calm, almost smug, Jimmy smiling but clearly rattled, creating the kind of moment people would be replaying online for days. The show ended not with neat banter, but with a lingering question in the air. Was it all performance, or had Pacino just pulled off one of the rawest, realest late-night interviews ever?